Hey everyone, I'm Steve Birch. Here at PublishPress, we are really focused on the publishing experience for WordPress. We have half a dozen different plugins that are all focused on improving the publishing experience. Today I'm talking with someone else who's working on the same problem, Steve Beatty from the Newspack Project. Newspack is part of Automattic, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible for newspapers to go online with WordPress. Often newspapers are underfunded and have better things to spend their money on than a really expensive tech stack. So Newspack is offering WordPress as a hosted installation for about $1,000 a month, which is pretty cheap compared to the amount of developer time you can get for that. And Newspack is also available as a downloadable package on GitHub. You can download and install Newspack now. I talk with Steve about the origins of Newspack and what their goals are, and he explains to me where they are in their process. Spoiler alert, they're just launching their first site now, and they're hoping to have a big ramp up in 2020. We talk about Newspack and how we can get more publishers to standardize on WordPress, particularly those which aren't a major household brand name and want to get up and running without hiring dedicated IT staff or spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with an agency. Hey, Steve, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Steve, you are a key part of the Newspack project. Can you tell us what you do?
Sure. I'm the communications guy for Newspack, which means I'm the one on the 8-person team that is probably best suited to talk with publishers, as I used to be, and translate what it is that the developers are talking about, which sound like a lot of American words, but for real publishers who aren't techs, have trouble following along.
Okay, so you actually used to be a publisher yourself?
I was. I ran The Lens in New Orleans. It's coming up on 10 years old. I was the editor and publisher there for the first 8 years. And before that, had about 20 years experience in the old-fashioned print newspapers.
Okay, so to some extent, you are the go-between that connects the tech people at Automattic to the newspapers and the publishers. You maybe understand the language of both of them. Certainly you understand what newspapers and magazines need in terms of their tech stack.
Yep, that's right. My internal motto is so simple, even an editor can do it. So if they can get Newspack to the point where I can drive it, we're in the money.
So you're working with Newspack. Can you explain a little bit about Newspack itself? What's the goal? What is Automattic and its partners, such as Google, attempting to do with Newspack?
We want to come up with a standardized and commonly used base for a content management system that could be easily deployed by small and medium-sized publishers. The large publishers have their own developers that can build their own systems and maintain them and work with them. But a lot of times, we're talking about some of the new upstart publishers who might have 3 or 4 people on staff, up to publications with 40 or 50 staff members. But what we want to do is end this ecosystem of one-off CMS where everybody kind of built their own thing and had trouble sharing or understanding or using the features they saw on someone else's site. I would go to a journalism convention and see a feature or a story presented in a certain way, and I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. I'm going to go back to my office and figure out how to do it. Then you run into the buzzsaw of reality. You can't reproduce that because they're on Drupal and you're on WordPress or what have you. In this case, if you saw another Newspack user that did something you like, you could easily adopt their code and recreate it with very little problem.
So there are some newspaper platforms out there. I think the Washington Post, for example, has one that it tries to sell to other newspapers at, I think, an extraordinary amount of money per year. The goal with Newspack is to try and create a standardized platform for sort of low to medium-sized publishers that may not have an IT person on staff, publishers that need some help, maybe don't have a big budget.
That's right. It's priced so it's less than 5% of virtually any publisher's revenue. We've got two prices. It's either $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month. And the determining factor is whether you bring in more or less than $500,000 in revenue. And that works out fairly well in terms of keeping it at 5% or less of even the smaller publishers' budget. We also wanted to come up with a dollar amount that would reach a break-even point for Automattic, so they could continue to support it. A lot of people will start building things, especially in the nonprofit world, and it sounds good, and then they can lose interest in it, especially if it's not a money maker. This isn't meant to make a tremendous amount of money for Automattic. We want to reach a point of equilibrium and provide the greatest benefit to the greatest number of publishers out there that we can.
Well, when I downloaded and did some research about Newspack, it struck me that $1,000 a month is maybe 10 hours of a developer's time. If you're a startup or a small newspaper, then you can either choose to move to a platform like this where there's a lot of support or a lot of development already done, or you can hire an outside developer or bring someone on staff, and the costs of doing that are exponentially more than $1,000 or $2,000 a month.
Oh, it's a tremendous amount, especially if you start from scratch and you have to hire a designer and then have a developer translate that design into code. And then what you end up with generally is a very locked-in format. You end up with a template where you've got squares to fill with copy, but you can't rearrange those squares. Newspack is very drag and drop with the Gutenberg block system. You can, if you don't like the way your homepage looks, you can essentially wipe out and start over and come up with something different in a half an hour. And it's meant not to put a staff developer or IT person out of work. It's meant to put them more in the service of journalism. We think there's better things that developers can do with their time to drive reader engagement and to find different ways of storytelling. They don't need to spend their time rotating the tires, changing the oil and wiper blades on a system.
So I logged in, went to the GitHub account for Newspack, downloaded it, installed it, gave it a try. And what struck me was that there wasn't too much to Newspack itself. There was an installer, but it seemed like a carefully curated set of plugins that would be super useful for publishers. There was Jetpack, there was SiteKit from Google, there was AMP, there was Facebook Pages, there was WooCommerce if you want to take donations. Can you explain the thought process behind building Newspack? Is it that you're relying on the popular plugins, the reliable plugins that are developed elsewhere, and then bringing them into a trusted and vetted package for the publishers?
Yeah, you've got it exactly right. I mean, we want Newspack to be the main driver plugin, and it's kind of a puppeteer where it will install the plugins necessary to reach a publisher's goal. So we have a setup screen where it walks you through and it asks you questions. Do you want to accept advertising? Do you want to accept reader donations? And depending on your answer to that, it will install in the background the necessary plugins to make that happen. And the best thing about WordPress is that there's more than 50,000 plugins out there. And the worst thing about WordPress is there's 50,000 plugins out there that you have to go through and sort and determine, is this reliable? Is it still being supported? Is it going to affect my system in any way? And the Newspack team, with every plugin that we're choosing or that we're evaluating, we're going to make sure that it runs at optimum efficiency with the rest of Newspack. It won't crash your system, and it will continue to be updated and maintained.
Okay, so it's heavily curated. How does a team of developers like the ones we have here at PublishPress, we make publishing-related plugins too, how do we interact with Newspack? Is it possible for Newspack publishers who are on Newspack to pick and choose their own plugins, to build their own plugins? Is it a closed system once it's installed for them, or can they go to WordPress.org and choose plugins like ours or plugins from other developers to enhance their sites?
There's nothing that we have nothing that will stop people from installing their own plugins. We don't want to put any limits on what anyone wants to do with their own site. That's not the business that we're in. WordPress.com is very committed to the open source community. That said, we do want to keep a platform that runs at peak efficiency and be able to help you vet the plugins that you're adding. It may not necessarily be that you've chosen the right plugin or the most efficient or most optimized plugin. So we'll ask you, what is the outcome that you want to achieve with this? And we'll go to work trying to find the best plugin if it exists. If it doesn't exist, we will, and we think it's a great idea, we'll get to building it. But the goal of Newspack is to not build things new, but to go out and find the best, highest resource plugins that we can bring together to do the narrow job of publishing for local news.
So can you talk me through where you guys are on your roadmap at the moment? I've seen the announcements that you have the first handful of newspapers actually live on the system. And if I'm correct, there's maybe a couple of batches of about a dozen publishers in each batch going through. Can you talk me through where you are in terms of actually getting live sites launched with Newspack?
Sure. We started this process in April when nothing existed but an idea on a piece of paper. We put out a call for applications. We got more than 300 around the world. From that, we chose our initial 12 news sites to help us develop this. One dropped out because of changes in their publisher. So the remaining 11 publishers have worked with us over the last 7 months to tell us what their best practices are and what they need out of a system. And we've built for them the most common set of characteristics that we could gather from them to meet their needs. 3 of those 11 have launched already. They are Oklahoma Watch in the U.S. was the first site called El Soberano in Santiago, Chile, and The Lens in New Orleans. The remaining 9 should launch over the next 6 to 8 weeks. In the meantime, we've selected second cohort of 36 publishers, and we're making a big jump in numbers to show that we can scale what we learned from these 11 up to 36. And they're in our second round. They expect to publish, to relaunch with Newspack sometime in 2020.
Oh, okay. So 2019 has been a slow build-up, but you're really expecting to ramp things up in 2020. You may be going from 3 to 30-plus publishers really pretty quickly.
Yeah, we hope within 4 or 5 months that we could have 50 sites up and running with Newspack. And while the production of that is going on, we're likely to open up rolling applications once again. Okay,
so what does the future look like once this first batch of, say, 30, 40, 50 sites is live? Is it still going to be an application process? You'll still be vetting publications that still want to come on board? Is there a rough ETA for when it might be an open platform where any publication can come along, pay their money, and use Newspack?
Yeah, we hope to reach that level of nearly self-serve probably in about 2.5 or 3 years from the start of development. But in these early days of toddlerhood, the system and our customers need a little bit more care and feeding, and we're happy to give that to them because we get from them as much as they give to us. And we're happy to have their input because we're building a system for them.
So have you learned anything really surprising or interesting from digging so deep into the needs of these publishers? Has it surprised you how much, how they're looking to raise money or their particular technical needs?
Well, I think what surprised us to some degree was how common most news websites are under the hood. Okay. There's a lot of very simple needs or simple to describe needs, and really the change from website to website is maybe 15% of the equation, and it's the visual and the stylistic. And one thing we want to do with Newspack, when we have a Newspack theme, we want it to be a theme in that it's a style that overrides the whole site, rather than theme has taken on the meaning of template more traditionally. So it's definitely not a template site. It's not cookie cutter. It may be cookie cutter in how it processes the information and the plugins it uses, but you can set up the sites to be as individualized and as flashy as you'd like.
Cool. So if someone's listening to this and says, okay, I'm involved or I help out a publication that might be curious about Newspack, is there a way for them to contact you or kick the tires on it?
Sure. Happy to talk with anybody who's interested. You can email me at steve.beatty, that's B as in boy, EATTY, at automattic.com. And Automattic has the 2 T's at the end. Or they can go to newspack.blog, and there's the sign up for an email toward the end of that page. And we regularly send out updates when we have major developments that happen. We also post things semi-regularly to that blog. There's a couple demo videos you can watch. There's before and after images of our clients who have launched already.
Okay. And it's fair to say that if someone starts having an interest in Newspack, they're going to see an explosion of launches and more information coming next year.
Yeah, that would, if we had a giant run on Newspack, that would be a great problem to have. And I'm sure that I'm sure Automattic would find a way to accommodate that.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve. I wish you all the best with Newspack.
You're welcome, and thanks so much for having me.